Hey, Jason,
Yes, Cam.
who's that below us?
Oh my gosh, it's Eben. When did you
Oh.
join the show?
Let's find out in a minute.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Entertainment Foods. Unlike every other show we've ever done before, we've actually got our guest in the very beginning for us. Eben,
Why not? We always unceremoniously bring the guest in, so I figured why not just do it from the beginning? I mean,
that
come
was
on.
very unceremonious, I think.
It was. But you know what? We're on a little bit of a time crunch today, so let's get right into it. We have Eben Matthews with us, and he is the creator of Macroverse, right?
Macroverse.
Macroverse? They say
Macro-
macro.
If
It's
you're in the
potato,
South,
potato.
you're like- if you're in the South and you're like, hey, that's a microverse.
Micro.
I love me that there.
I
microverse.
do. Get that micro stuff going on. I'm in Nashville, forgive me. So tell us about what you're currently doing, and then we'll go and get a little bit into your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me. Nice to be amongst dudes.
Yeah.
So Macroverse is a next generation entertainment studio. And right now we're primarily focused on reinventing comics, so comic books, for a kind of next generation of franchise building and a new way of working with creators to develop new forms of entertainment that start as comics and then expand into lots of other types of media as well. So we have a mobile app, which is out on iOS and Android right now. We're doing a bunch of interesting things in the world of collectability, both digitally and physically. With very small ambitions, we feel we'll have a kind of opportunity to reinvent a bunch of how this has worked for the last 50 years.
How are comics going to look in the future? I mean, they've been kind of the same for a long time. How are you elevating the comic and evolving it?
Yeah, great question. And one of my favorites. So, when we started down this path, and we can get kind of into some of the history of it, but when we started down this path, I'd been a lifelong comics fan. The first thing that I thought that I was going to do was draw comics. So I went to art school thinking I was going to come out and draw comics. I didn't end up doing that, although I have drawn some comics over the course of my career. But what I saw was that, this art form, you talk about the industry as kind of a separate conversation, but this art form is truly a unique way of telling stories. And so what we ultimately found after a lot of experimentation and seeing a lot of what people were trying to do with digital, everyone kind of recognized about a decade ago, like digital should probably play some role in comics, but what is that? Because it is such a distinct creative process, is a distinct form of storytelling. So the best we've basically come up with, not us, but the best that the comics industry came up with is like, let's put a PDF on an iPad. Like, we don't know what else to do with it. So anyone that's used Comixology knows that you're kind of pinching and zooming around a digital version of a physical page.
Right.
The big insight that we finally had after lots of development was that you can't change the art form. You can't start adding animation and sound and transitions and like all that stuff turns into something else. Now it's just bad animation in many cases.
Right.
And so, what we focused on were two things. One is, how do you put more tools in the toolbox for storytellers and people that actually make this art and make the stories? And then number two, what's the digitally native format for comics? Because I think what we've learned over the years is that when you're making something in a new medium, replicating the old medium is a subpar experience, where really focusing on what does this new medium do uniquely well is the place to find something interesting and perhaps elevate it. And so what we ultimately figured out is that what digital does that paper and print and even other forms of digital like webtoons, kind of scrolling doesn't do, is eliminates the constraints of a canvas size. Yeah. And so when you think about a traditional print comic, there are only a certain number of word balloons that can fit on a page. The only thing you have to play with as a storyteller is the page turn. So everything is written to, something that's going to leave you on a cliffhanger moment at the bottom of the bottom corner of the page, so that you can surprise the reader on the next page turn. Because everything else you're kind of getting contextually by just looking at the pages as they come up. So you can't really surprise people. You can't really tell a joke in the midst of, the double page spread. When you're looking at something like webtoons, like you're seeing it as you scroll through the page. So again, you're kind of constrained by not being able to really have a kind of setup and payoff that we have in other forms of media. And so when you eliminate the constraints of the page, those things go away and it opens up some new opportunities around storytelling. So our format that we invented is called a tap story. Every time you tap the screen, something changes. And so you can think about that as, instead of scrolling, you might start on a panel that's a close-up of the character's eye, and you tap it again, and now we're in, a medium shot. You tap it again, now we're in a wide shot. So you can reveal things over a number of taps. You can move through a sequence in a way that you can't do in traditional comics. Still the juxtaposition of words and pictures. So again, not adding animation, not adding other media, but the way you mix those elements together creates an entirely new kind of context, and it adds time as an element of the storytelling. So going through, point A to point B in the story, if you're tapping through 3 taps, that's very different than tapping through 300 taps. You get kind of an experience of time. And then the final thing I'll say is that the active nature of tapping the screen, as simple of a mechanic as that is, really makes you feel like you're in control of the pace of the experience in a way that traditional comics, and especially scrolling comics, don't do. So I think that was kind of the core insight. And then we built a bunch of stuff around that. But it's this format that allows people that know how to make comics still make comics the way they've always made them, with some new opportunities in the storytelling, some new tools in the toolbox. And that's the core of it.
That's awesome. Sounds like there's almost a little bit of even an improvement, because you were limited to that 2-page fold before, and now there's a lot more a chance for jokes and cliffhangers and so forth.
I was just gonna say, we could talk for an hour about my theories around the differences between these different formats and why they work the way they work and how to lean into those. This is a soapbox I'm happy to get on, but we can save that for another time. So Jason, what is your question?
I was just going to say, so I know you hear a lot about Web3 and, the web of things, things are changing. And so for some people who don't understand, it's like iPhone 6, iPhone 7, blah, blah, blah. But Web3 completely changes everything, right? Like it's like an exponential leap forward. How has your team kind of taken the new things that are coming out? What is it, and how are you finding the best way to use it?
Yeah, so I would first say, some people that haven't perhaps, gone too deeply down the kind of Web3 rabbit hole, there has been a little bit of a negative turn in some people's association with that term, or, the idea of NFTs and, some of these things, just, building things on blockchains, let's be real. There was a time in the early days of the internet, which I remember very well, where I sent money to someone through Craigslist, using Western Union, thinking I was buying laptop, and never got anything back.
Oh, that's terrible. Yes.
So, new technologies invite scammers. That is just a part of the deal. And so we have absolutely seen that run rampant, through this kind of world of Web3, where people have, either intentionally or unintentionally ripped people off. And there's kind of gotten to be this bad name around the speculative nature of some of these projects and assets. And, it's just a big casino. And some of those are very legitimate criticisms. But I think what we have really focused on from the beginning is always, what do new technologies enable creators to do? How do we use these things to tell better stories or increase the experiences that we can offer to people? And so our approach using these technologies is taking that tap story format. And then the big light bulb moment around Web3 for us was, I have 25 long boxes of comics that I've collected over the course of my life. I was never satisfied as someone that likes collecting comics with the idea of I'm just, again, downloading a PDF. What is that? So it's being able to bring true collectability to comics in a digital format was the thing that got us excited about this to begin with. And that's part of what we've been building out over the past, kind of year and a half as well. So those are called Epics, is our brand name for digital collectible comics. So you'll buy Epic editions of these, different series. And it's again, sort of leaning into this notion of like, once you put something in a new package, how do you rethink some of the fundamentals around what that is? So, in the Web3 world, what we had seen was, here's a piece of cover art that you own as a digital collectible item. And then that unlocks a PDF. We're back to PDFs. We rethought that process too, where we figured out some technology to take all of the content, basically our whole Tap Story, player and the way that all that works, and package it inside these digital collectible editions. And so you can buy them and sell them and trade them just like you would, something that you bought at the comic store as your favorite graphic novel.
And they're fully interactive too, right? The same interactivity?
Yeah, so they're fully interactive. And then we also have the ability over time to, let's say you're someone that really engages in the community, and there's a whole, aspect of this, which is about fandom and community, which is really exciting. So you're someone that shows up and adds value to the community. We can give you some bonus, features or content or reward you in different ways, because we can see these people have collected these editions, and now we have access to, like, let's say, hey, let's give you a special piece of art or, something cool to add to your collection because of your participation in the ecosystem. And so, at a high level, that's really a lot of how we think about this, is rethinking the way that we align the community, the fandom, the content creators, the content itself, in a way where everyone gets to participate in new, interesting ways and have experiences around building these things together over time, as opposed to like, hey, we're just making stuff and we'll put it out and we hope you like it. So it's a different way of kind of, building these things out while having these new technologies to kind of build with and around.
You obviously have a passion for the industry and the art form, and it would take someone with that to actually develop something like this, caring about the actual experience of, it takes someone who has experienced the PDFs, and I never could get into that at all. And what you've developed is something that I could totally get behind. So what is your experience in comics? How did you get involved in the comic world?
Yeah, so I mean, it goes all the way back to, I've been drawing since I was 2 years old. Like I said, I thought I was going to go up to draw comics. So, my entire time in high school was like sending samples to Marvel, and I have rejection letters and all that good stuff from a couple of editors back in the day that gave me some really great feedback. And then when I was in high school, my dad lived in Atlanta. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia. And I actually, it was through going to Dragon Con, one of the conventions.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I spent, I think it was my first Dragon Con. I met a professional comic artist named Brian Stelfreeze, who is probably best known for a massive, incredible run of covers on Shadow of the Bat. He also did Black Panther with Ta-Nehisi Coates. He's an incredible artist, as well as just one of the best mentors that anyone could possibly have, not just for art, but just kind of as a human. And so he and I spent an entire weekend basically sitting at his table watching him draw. And as a 13-year-old, he was just so generous with, giving me advice and showing me what he was doing. And so we stayed connected. And when I would go up to Atlanta, I would go to their studio and hang out, and, started to meet the guys that were at this, studio called Gaijin. And so it was him and Cully Hamner and Jason Pearson, who created Body Bags. And, it's an incredible group of artists. And, I would send them samples. And so then when I went to art school, so I went to Rhode Island School of Design. When I went to art school, I thought I was 100% going I'm going to go there and then I'm going to come out and draw comics. That was what I was totally focused on.
That's the path.
Yeah, it's a path. And Brian gave me the best advice, which is really what's, created everything that came after, which was, you're arguably going to one of the best art schools in the country. Take all the stuff you think you want to do and set that aside and just learn everything that you can learn. And if you want to pick that back up at the end, 100% do that, but just get as much experience and as much skill and as much talent and explore without this preconceived notion of what you're going to do with it. It was incredible advice. And when I graduated, instead of going and drawing comics, I recruited a bunch of my professors to start my first company. And
what was that? What was that company doing?
Yeah, so the first company was called Infusion. and
Okay.
we were a kind of small agency, and we initially started doing things like children's books for Target and things like that. And then the magic moment for us as an agency was when Flash and all kinds of interactive stuff on the web started to really be a thing. And so we were one of the
Dreamweaver Flash.
Yeah, Dreamweaver, Flash. I mean, being able to do animation on the web and getting really good at that was something that was what propelled us as in that first company. And so we got really good at doing high-end interactive web development at a time when that was a real skill set. And so that was the thing that, for a decade, like we did these big web projects for lots of Fortune 500 companies and, all that kind of stuff. We made some inroads into the video game world through that as well. And so, the second phase was I met my now creative partner and actually co-founder who, he and I have been writing together for the last 20 plus years now. And he was in the film and television side. So when we met, he was a PA on the first Transformers movie.
Okay.
Nice.
And
that's a dirt job right there. Wow.
It was incredible. But that was also my first time going to set. So like going downtown LA. And
Amazing.
Like, destruction of this kind of whole world of Transformer destruction.
They left it the same way, I guess, because I've gone down there recently.
yes, the giant potholes.
They're supposed to fix that stuff after the movie.
I think after the movie's over, probably a subsidy there somewhere. But so Adam Martin is his name, and he and I, became friends, and then we started writing together. And so, this was a post-Tarantino world. We're getting like, okay, we want to move from the making stuff for other people side of the equation to the making our own content, creating our own stuff side of the equation. How are we going to do that?
Yes.
And at that moment in LA, it was like you write a screenplay, you become a famous director. That's what we're going to do. So we did write a screenplay.
That's the plan. That's the path.
That's a clear, direct path. So
easy.
We thought so. we did write that screenplay. We did get that one optioned. That landed us at CAA. So we were at
cool.
The big
so awesome.
We did all of the pitching that you can do. So we like to say the water bottle tour of production companies in Los Angeles, where
Would you like a water? Would you like a water?
Would you like a water? And then
give me something harder. Like,
yeah. So we pitched a ton of stuff. We had one TV pilot that we wrote that got pretty close to moving forward. We were, kind of in the midst of packaging it and putting it together. And then it had zombies in it. And that's when they sold The Walking Dead. And despite the fact that there could be 10 shows on television with vampires in them, at that moment there could only be one show on television that had zombies in them. And so that killed that project. And so from there, we, through a friend, found our way into the video game world. So we spent the next decade writing, directing, and producing game content. And so I think that it's an interesting way that all these kind of things have come together for Macroverse, because it was that experience making, creating stories and figuring out how to do things in an interactive context that have actually informed a lot of the thinking and decision making that we've made around, how we approach digital comics and this larger platform, and leaning into the user experience and, all of the kind of gamification layer around it and all of that. So that, was the kind of next chapter was writing game content. So we were, essentially go into the mid-tier console game, and then they would go, we want to create a story for this game. We don't want to spend $1 million making 3D cinematics for it. So we were early pioneers in motion comics, like figuring out how to take, animation and illustration and combine that in an artful way. And, the first project that we did was like 90 plus minutes of, animation and story that went into this game. And so that kind of set off the next chapter. And then from there, we just kind of found our way into all these interesting, new media projects. There was a time when there was a whole category of app-based content called chat fiction, which is, you would, kind of simulate the notion that you were kind of eavesdropping on a chat conversation between characters. And a lot of it was like horror-based, and, it was really popular for a little while. So we ended up doing a bunch of that. We helped a company actually spin up a whole writer's room and, figure out how to produce a whole ton of, that type of content. So, we just ended up doing all these interesting things. And then I was talking to Cam before we came on camera. The final thing that led us to Macroverse is producing a graphic novel series for the Boondock Saints. And so that was what brought me back into comics. And it was this real peek behind the curtain of how does the whole industry work? And so because I was coming into it with fresh eyes, we had this incredible experience producing an independent comic that people really paid attention to. We had this, incredible fan base for the Boondock Saints.
Yeah.
And it's always a fond memory to me thinking, I think it was either at San Diego or WonderCon, where the line, we had Norman Reedus and Sean Patrick Flannery with us for these signings. And
Amazing.
The line was like around the convention center, and the security people were like, "What is going on? Like, Marvel's over there, and Image's over there. Like, why are all these people with tattoos in line over here?" And so,
awesome.
incredible experience. But it really showed me, like, okay, we want to make more content this way. This is also at a time when comics and Hollywood are just becoming, more and more, together, and so much content is coming from the comics industry, and that hasn't slowed down, of course. So we saw this as a real opportunity to kind of take the things that we had wanted to do in film and television, have more control over them. Again, go back to telling our stories that that we wanted to create and tell, own the characters, the underlying intellectual property. So, we started very selfishly with we want to do this for us. And then because of the background and kind of just the way that we think about this stuff, it was the easy way to do this would be to keep publishing traditional comics. But there's got to be something in this kind of future of digital, every part of the entertainment industry is going digital, and comics won't do it in a meaningful way. And they're not going to do it from the inside. So are we the, brilliant or the insane people to decide to try to take this on and
yes,
this industry? And the
all the above.
Yes. The answer is yes.
So that's how we got here, and we spent about 2 years prototyping, creating the first series, which actually was the TV pilot that got killed by The Walking Dead. So that series is now in comics.
Now it's ours. We own the intellectual property. Thank you. That's
so
great.
That is, if you're curious, that is Dead Town. It's the flagship title that we launched the app with.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
That's I like even the different styles that you have. A lot of times it feels like a studio comes out with a certain thing. Marvel does a certain thing. All these, and you have everything from Moonbirds to to me, the artwork of that one in particular is fun. Having a kid, there's a childlike nature to it, but it's also sort of like this darker side. And each of the pieces of artwork that you have are completely different from each other. And there is uniformity in terms of all of it feels very alive and feels very draws you into it. But there is no uniformity in terms of we do it this way and this is how we do it. Yeah. So tell me a little about that. It's awesome.
Thank you. I actually really appreciate you highlighting that. So I think, one of the things that we decided very early on is I'm not saying there couldn't be a brilliant take for superhero comics, but also feel like Marvel and DC have got that.
Yeah.
So,
right.
There are a few exceptions like The Boys or Invincible, which, we all have come to love. But, the world of creating superhero comics, is the industry is littered with the gravestones of small companies that have tried to come in and create, the next wave of superhero comics. Right. So, we felt like there's a bigger opportunity in finding interesting creators with great stories that, we can help support, bring these things to market to a wider audience, to, develop this thing in this new way. And to really be a little agnostic, to your point, around either style or particular genre or, exactly what their, the nature, the tone of it is, but, really just be a home for the best creative output that we could find. And so, I like
the story, focus on the story itself.
Focus on the story and focus on the quality. So I
quality,
think,
quality
a lot of a lot of the way that we, kind of talked about this in the past is this is the HBO approach. So it's not everything on HBO is necessarily going to be for everyone, but you have a certain expectation that it's all going to hit a quality bar. And so that's really been our approach to, the type of content that we bring on the app. And then the other thing, which is, informs some of this thinking is, looking at just the comics industry in general. It's like, once you take Marvel and DC and superheroes out of the equation, you'll get like, oh, it's it's something is killing the children. It's, Saga. It's, stuff that's doing different, interesting things with really phenomenal creators at the helm that are the breakouts in the traditional comics world. You'll get Webtoons, which has 100 million monthly active users. Most of the most popular titles there are like slice of life and romance and like totally different kinds of genres. And then it's the YA bookstore market, which is the other kind of biggest growing segment of the comics industry, which is interestingly new characters, new creators, but something that really resonates with kind of the next generation, the audience that's coming behind us. And I think the traditional comics industry in some ways has kind of lost its way because we grew up with the industry and then we never went back and created stuff for the next generation. So there's a real hole in like, what are my kids going to be reading that's in a comic store? Very little.
Yeah. What are you seeing now? Like, what do you think that what kind of content are young kids wanting to see now? Yeah. Like, what's resonating? Yeah.
Well, I think part of it, and this is part of what we're trying to answer with our approach here, is the short attention span, that the next generation has. And I watch I give my daughter the chief futurist hat in the company all the time because I watch the way she consumes content, and it's a lot of Roblox, it's a lot of YouTube. Like, that's the stuff that she's most interested in. And the books that she has fallen in love with, and it delights me to no end that there's a handful of graphic novels that she really loves. But they're adventure, they're fantasy, her favorite one is this kind of dragon, saga. And that's like one of the few things that she will choose to spend her time on reading. And again, I find kind of fascinating, like it's a group of characters and it's a world that she's fallen in love with. And so a lot of our thinking around this stuff is that, especially as media becomes more fragmented, it's never been more important that you find ways to engage people in a world, in a set of characters that they have some emotional resonance to. I don't think it's enough to just be like, oh, this is the cool looking muscly guy with the gun, anymore. It's like, there's got to be more to it where we want to spend time in these worlds and develop experiences around these worlds. And a lot of what I watch her do is like, if she falls in love with a particular series or a particular movie, like she wants multiple experiences around that content. It's not just the movie. What else can I do to kind of be in this world? So sometimes that's a Roblox, extension of that. Or sometimes it's like, I want toys or, putting on shirts. Like, it's like the different ways to feel like I'm connected to and a part of this thing that I love. And so I think that's important as we think about building new content. It's like, how do you create more than just the one experience to let people come in and play and be a part of this thing as it's growing?
Yeah, that's what I noticed is like there's a wheel of content now at ways to access media. Whether you're going to do it through web, social, whether you're doing it through, and how to create stories that integrate across all of those platforms and still tell the same story. I started concepting this a while back when I thought it'd be great to be able to do a series that you see on TV, but during the week we drop episodes like the door closes and they have a fight behind the door. Well, if you want to know the door thing, that's online where you can find it on your Instagram. You can share, you can interact with the characters. So there's so many cool new ways to access content. And I love the idea that you said about creating world building, because to me that's been like, we have to create anchors for the story that ground the entire universe in a world in which people immerse themselves in the world, and then you can introduce, change characters, open new portals, and bring people explore this new world with characters that they love. And I love that you said that, because that's exactly the last probably 4 scripts I've written in the stories. It's all based on that. Even online, like there are sections of my stories where I'm like, this is a YouTube. So the main characters do a YouTube series, and so they actually, part of the show is in the series where they're live recording the show as it's happening on TV, that people can then interact with the characters, because they want that authenticity. They want the connectivity. They want to be able to engage with the story in a meaningful way. That's not just like I'm sitting in front of a screen and you're telling me, and I think it's fascinating. I think it's an exciting time to be being part of this industry.
Oh, it absolutely is, and I think it's we even coming out of the writer's strike and all the turmoil that's kind of been happening in the entertainment industry. I mean, I think the entertainment industry in general, especially at the high end of it, is in this sort of moment of rethinking, reinventing, having to kind of deal with the changes that are happening,
Right.
for us as consumers, like all these different elements. And so I do think there's kind of a magical opportunity here to rethink some of the fundamentals, and it's why comics are so exciting to us, because it's it's not just that we love the art form, but it's also a way to essentially somewhat economically tackle some of these questions and try to find some solutions that work. And if they work for comics, why would they not work for audio? Why would they not work for animation, so forth and so on. So I think we're kind of using this as a little bit of a Trojan horse to go like, let's figure out how this is going to work as an ecosystem, how it's going to work with fans, and then be able to build it into bigger and bigger type.
I see Macroverse. When I saw it, I said that's an IP generator. That's the primary function of the Macroverse, is exactly to generate characters, IP stories that can then be licensed, used, productions, films, TV shows. It's the anchor again to the universe, and it's a fantastic idea. And what a great. I had a question, Cam, and then I'm sorry, you can. I know you had one. We got it bust, but
It's okay.
What is it that you think that has made comic stories so successful? Like, why have we interacted with comics? Why comics?
So I don't know. I can only talk. Well, I can share my own experience, and then can kind of speculate a little bit. So I think for me, like, I learned to read from comics. Like, that was kind of the thing that I was attracted to as a kid. And again, sort of lament a little bit the fact that there isn't really that as much content geared towards the next generation of the audience. I was pulling comics off the spinner rack at the gas station and stuff like that. So it was in front of me as a kid, and I just responded to those stories. For me, it was very much starting with Superman and Batman, and then as I got a little older, responding to more of the Marvel kinds of characters. And I've done quite a bit of thinking about, like, why is that? And I think very fundamentally comes down to Marvel characters. Their big innovation was like, these are people that are superheroes. They're not superheroes that have secret identities. And so that flip is really about that, again, that emotional connection, that being able to see yourself in these characters. And then I think there's something about the art form, when it is true to the art form, which does create this unique connection to the material, because it's an active experience in a way that, watching a show or watching a movie isn't, in the sense that even in traditional comics, you have panel 1, panel 2, but what happens in between those panels is just as important for the storytelling. Your brain is literally filling in the gaps to understand the context of these images and these words to create that story. So it engages your imagination in a way that something that just puts everything in front of you, doesn't do. So I think when people get attracted to that as an art form, it's more active, kind of engagement of that imagination in a way that, other media doesn't quite hit that same mark. So, it's not for everyone, but I think those of us that it's for, we get really into it.
So with changing taste and consumption and changing technology, what are some of the both the challenges and discoveries that you've made along the way to figure out how to create this new world?
Oh man, I mean, that's a big can of worms as well.
And in the 5 minutes we have left,
exactly.
I mean, here's what I would love to focus on, which addresses that in part. So, we talked a lot about kind of leaning into the things that we can identify as like unique elements of a particular approach or technology, or if we're putting this on a phone, how do you make it the best experience on a phone, not just a repurposed thing that you have to pinch and zoom around. So, I think the same thing comes to this idea of like building these worlds and franchises. One of the things that we do, which I would invite anyone that, sees this to come and check out and participate in, is we do a lot of community-based, fandom-based storytelling. So it's, one of the ways that we kind of close this loop is, what we look at this whole explosion bubble, kind of craziness around NFTs over the last couple of years. there are tens of thousands of characters that have now been created on a blockchain that have the ability to be owned, that, you know, someone can actually own a character in a particular world or franchise as a digital item. And so
That's
part
amazing.
of what we figured out is, you know, and this has all been worked out with lawyers, and there's a real framework for it. It's like, you know, so we invite people to own characters in these worlds, come and pitch those characters as part of the canonical universe.
Wow.
And a certain subset of them gets greenlit into production. So we get these anthology series, which is based on characters that, let's say, you own, and then they'll go out onto the app, ultimately into print. Let's say that one of them is the next Boba Fett or Deadpool. You get participation in that character. So it's
I love that. That's brilliant. That is brilliant.
Empowering the audience. So it's
Evan,
really
dude, that is literally brilliant. I can't think of a more fun way to interact in a universe. Like, come on.
My goodness. Yeah. So if somebody wants to do this and hook up with Macroverse, how do they do it?
Yeah, so, you know, the biggest place to interact directly, and if you want to kind of dive into that piece of it, then, you know, we have a Discord, which is discord.gg/Macroverse. So that's where our community mostly gathers. And then we do, you know, different programs every, you know, month or so where we get into specific worlds and the specific characters and how to go through that process. We're in the midst of 3 different anthologies right now with 3 different worlds. So there's, you know, 6 to 8 different stories that have come from community members that are now in production as comics in those different worlds. And then we're also on, you know, Twitter/X is probably the biggest, you know, social media place that we are. So just at Macroverse, or me directly is at Ebenverse. And very happy to respond to people there as well. But, you know, we're actually quite accessible for anyone that wants to kind of dive a little deeper into what we're doing.
Oh, now I know more about this. I have one I'd like to pitch. I got to get on the Discord there.
Well, get on the Discord.
We'd love to have you again on the show. Just it'd be great to do an actual walkthrough through a comic sometime and see how that stuff works. But I know you're out. Thank you so much for joining our show today. It really was wonderful having you. Learning there's so much to go into with what you're creating. And I think it is the future of entertainment. And if we do not have this important conversation with the people who are at the foundational levels of making this happen, we as storytellers are going to not be able to serve our audience as well as we can. So thank you so much for sharing your heart, your passion, the things that you're creating. It's really, really exciting.
That's right. Check out Macroverse, really folks.
Yeah, Macroverse.com. And then I would be remiss to not shout out, like, download the app, like iOS or Android. Lots of great content on there, and that's another access point into everything that we're building.
iPad or iPhone, which is better to watch it?
So everything is very intentionally to be the best experience you can have on your phone, but it absolutely works on both. And a little bit, you know, here's a little tease. Within the next handful of months, we'll have a specific kind of tablet and web, you know, orientation for these things as well. So again, custom built for the screen that you're picking it up on.
Stroke my beard. I like this.
I'll twist. Thank you guys. I really
great having you. Thank you. Sure. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. It's a pleasure.
Man, that's fascinating.
Amazing. I mean, it's like we spent this whole time building up to this, and then at the end, bam. I mean, here's the big thing: owning your own character in the universe. How more interactive and a part of the universe can you be?
Well, think about it too, because not everybody has the ability, the talent, the knowledge, the ways to create an entire universe and force it into the world. Plus, you're competing in terms of just marketing. Like, how do we advertise this piece? How do I get people to come watch it? How do we get butts in seats? But can I draw a character? Can I create my favorite character and then pick it into a world that already exists? Yes, because it's bite-sized pieces and it involves everyone. And am I more likely to share when it's my character?
Of course. Yes.
I'm making me. Like, why should I not be a superhero comic?
Wow, the future and how technology has, like, I'm so glad to see this, because I have not been able to get into just the PDFs of the comics.
No.
Avid, the books themselves, yes, but trying to move over to PF, it wasn't. So I'm so excited to try this because
There's
it
that
looks like
tangible aspect, like he said. You said visceral. You pick it up in the market and you open it and you look at it and you're holding it.
And
like
that's what's
books,
been
I
missing.
love them, but yeah. So how do you create a similar feeling or experience with digital, which is very interesting. I mean, if I am holding the pad, I like even said just the tap allows you to have a certain amount of functional control over what's happening. So
yeah,
I'd love to have him back on to kind of really be like, okay, here's the story. Let's go over the story, break it down, how it's done, why is it important, what are the things that spawn off of that story? Like here now you can do this. Here's this character, this person's character is presented in there. I think that's awesome.
It is. And so folks, check out Macroverse and Macroverse.
If you're from the South and your camera,
if you're from the South, it's Macroverse, macro, potato, tomato, or maybe not.
It's Macroverse.
It's not. It's Macroverse.
Macroverse.
Yes, Macroverse. I like.
No, you're gonna lose that one. You're gonna be like,
what about?
I'm Blu-ray. You're
what
that
about
other thing?
Data and data. Data and data.
I thought it was data.
No.
Data.
It's an argument. Data and data.
Data. I say data.
It became
it depends
data.
What you're being used in.
It became
I think it's
data.
Like a collection of data.
With Star Trek: The Next Generation, it became data. That's where it became.
Because he's data. That's why.
Yes.
Yeah.
But before that, it was data, whatever. So I don't know. I don't know. Potato. Let's call the whole thing off.
If you haven't followed Entertainment Dudes, you should.
You should. And click these videos up there on the left and subscribe for more videos.
Are they usually there?
Woo!